This video is sponsored by Loot Crate. Loot Crate is a subscription-based service sending you an assortment of exclusive collectibles, figures, apparel, and other cool geek gear delivered right to your door. For more information, check out lootcrate.com/JaganX or follow the link in the description below. If you decide Loot Crate is right for you, don't forget to give yourself a sweet discount by making sure you enter the promo code JaganX to save 20% off. Thanks guys, and enjoy the rest of the video. Hey guys, welcome to another session of RBTL. So we got some exciting news. Hero balance adjustment preview part 1 and 2. Something about artifacts as well. That's pretty cool. So I'm going to get to the artifact part in a bit. First, I'm going to give my thoughts on just the hero buffs. So I did a reading here on stream with the guys, and I'm just going to give you guys my sum up. Lilibet becomes way stronger, way more usable, 50% more damage dealt before compared to before on the S2. Well, I'm not 100% sure. I think the additional damage is like the 50% increase is only on when the target isn't buffed. I think that's the case, but I'm not quite sure because they're not putting it in the same sentence. So if this is an overall 50% compared to before plus an additional damage, I'm pretty sure that's pretty OP. I think it's 20% additional damage if the target is not buffed. So it's very good. Her S1 does the unbuffable, so it's very nice to have before, if you can proc it before someone else gets a buff up. And then increase the combat readiness of the caster by 50%. This is one of those things that really helps Lilibet because she's really, like, if you're going to build her as a nuker, she's going to be really slow. Mine is very slow, purely for the sake of nuking out Arbiter Vildrids or other revive heroes or revivers. So it's very good. Just that 50% combat readiness, I can see that being really useful already. The S3, I love this. Grant skill null for yourself for the next attack. So like for after you use the S3. So it's not like ML Ravi, where like ML Ravi grants it to the person she revives if she kills the enemy. Now this is just granting it after it's used. So I love that aspect. I think so, at least. So inflicting an extinction when enemy is defeated and then grants the skill null. I think it's right after it's used. But if it is the kill, then I don't think it's that good of a buff, I suppose. But still better than nothing. And then increased damage 11% compared to before. Love that. I think that makes Lilibet a lot more worthy to invest in terms of gear and having her in your roster. Again, we're gonna have to do some damage tests here. What this 50% really looks like on paper, what this 11% looks like on paper. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably do some kind of test before the patch, before the hero balance patch, with this exact same gear, and I'll probably like do an edit or something just to see what it looks like and what molas, how molas would affect that. Lidica, I'm a bit disappointed, but it still makes her a bit usable. I think if people are running Lidica on, let's say, a PvP defense team, I'm not 100% sure how good this would be. Again, the Dispel 1 buff this is the S2, so attacks all enemies, 100% decrease hit chance for 1 turn, Dispel 1 buff. It's nice on paper, but realistically, she's going to do her S3 first anyway. She'll have the skill null for the S3, so you might not be able to kill her off too quick, but the Dispel 1 buff, I think it comes after, based on the wording, comes after the hit chance. It would have been nice to have like the Dispel before the hit chance. I think that would have been a lot more usable, but a buff is a buff. I just don't think that their whole point of buffing is so that people will start using these heroes again, and I don't know if these buffs on Lidica specifically would make her more usable than the way she was before. I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't have a Lidica, but I don't think, like from what I've seen on people who use her on defense teams, I don't think these buffs really help in that aspect. Again, like I said, I think for PvP, if you're going to use it on an offense team, that would still be decent because she becomes a one buff despeller and she's quick. You don't have to go to the S3 if they have like full immunity. You wouldn't really use the S3 right away. If they have full immunity on their team, maybe you would use the S2 first and you set up for an S3. Make them unhealable is the increase on the S3 here. Kind of cool. Yeah, kind of cool, but again, I'm not 100% sure like if that's a really good buff, so it feels bad for Lidica in my opinion. Basar to me is one of the strongest buffs right now on this list. I'm very excited. I think I have to build him now. There's no excuse. 75% chance to transfer one debuff to enemy. You have to molar this. I think innately you have like a 50% chance to transfer on the S1. But then you can inflict a random debuff for 2 turns. So depends on the scale of the random debuff, like how you know what's included. If this means all of them, then you really don't need to run him on Abyssal Crown and Zero Ren. Maybe Abyssal Crown still, because his S3 and his S2 is still really good. So you can still, like, you know, use Abyssal Crown on him by any means. You could use other artifacts as well. But most likely some kind of debuff artifact for sure. On strippers, debuff artifacts are really good. Attacks all enemies, that's the S2. 75% chance to decrease the hit and attack for 2 turns. So it's like a mini Dizzy. It's like a mini Dizzy, but 75% chance, just to keep that in mind. And you can miss fire targets. So I would say, yeah, mini Dizzy for sure. Just know without the speed decrease. Soulburn effect is now swapped. 20 soul Soulburn, ignore effect resistance on the S3 instead of a decrease the skill cooldown for 2 turns. No one really used it. I mean, seriously, like before 10 souls, yes, but would you really use it? Decrease skill cooldown by 2. I think it was a 4-turn cooldown. And then it was a, you know, blind them for 2 turns. Like, whoa, whoop-de-doo, right? But now this is really good. Like every other soul, like ignore effect resistance hero so far, 20 souls is the trend. So pretty expensive, but not bad to have. If you're going for like a first turn like Despeller, perhaps you would even use Togglehole's Ancient Book on him, like a plus 31, to give him 20 souls. Unless you're running dual mages, that could be really nice to have. Attacks all enemies with sand magic, dispelling all buffs, making them unbuffable 2 turns, and didn't decrease the combat readiness by 30%. CR pushback. So other than the elemental disadvantage that Basar has, he's like as good or arguably better than Gerardo now, because he has the unbuffable as well. It's really cool, very cool, and ignore the effect resistance. There are changes, and I'll get to it. Changes in their speed too. So Basar is one of the mages. So mages are getting a speed increase for certain constellations, star signs. Basar gets a speed buff, so it makes him very, very usable. I really like it. I think he's gonna be really, really meta now. Fiend, just yeah. So pretty much the same, except the 85% chance to grant the silence, and then 3-turn cooldown, and it also damage 50%. So this is the AoE, this is the S2. Very good to have, 50% more damage. And then this now is interesting, the S3. Dispelling all buffs and stunning for 1 turn, instead of stunning for 1 turn and dispelling all buffs. So the stack is different. So now you can actually increase the damage if they're buffed. So I was saying that if you're using Fiend on an offense team and the defense team has someone like Montmorency or Angelica, let's say Montmorency puts up the S3, has the immunity buff on, like, you know, someone else, like a DPS. Usually DPS generally don't run very high effect resistance. So you might be able to dispel and do this as well. So let's say if it's like on a Crow, someone like it's harder to one shot and he doesn't have his shield buff and he has like an immunity buff up or something, this is gonna be good because you can dispel the buff, all buffs mind you, and then stun for 1 turn. So, you know, you could really, like, you know, put him into his, you know, S3 threshold, but then he might be stunned. So it's really, really useful. And I love how the dispel comes before the stun. Very, very nice. Fiend, I don't have her sadly, but I think for people who have her and have her built, you'll see her a lot more. You'll use her a lot more. Yuna is interesting. I really like Yuna's buff. Now she is a connection hero, though 5-star, harder to get, especially if you're a newer player. I think that she's a lot more usable. Now there's a question on the S1 passive. I'm not 100% sure how this is read. So increase combat readiness for the caster by 6% per target on the map. So if it's like a PvP, that's 4, right? So that's 24%. combat readiness boost. But then if you have, like, the wording here, this is where I'm getting confused, is that the per target is stops at the caster and increases combat readiness of all allies except caster by 2. So is this per target, or is this 2% without the, like, is this 2% flat, or is this 2% per target? That's my question. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll find out. If it's 2% per target, it's decent, because technically on a PvP fight you're getting about 8%. That's very, very nice to have. Not a 10 yet. I know people are like always like, oh, round it up to 10, you know, make it more usable, but 8 is really good if you consider what she does. If it's 2%, it's very, very insignificant, right? But I guess a buff is a buff. I guess if you put it that way. I guess 8% might be too OP now that I think about it. But yeah, the wording is what's confusing me. But yeah, I'm not sure. And then of course, when there are less than 3 enemies, damage increases for fewer enemies. So from 3 enemies onwards. So you get less CR boost, but you get more damage. Okay. So acquire focus is 2, cooldown is 3 on her S2. So the buff. So usually, you know, people had used her in the past for speed and attack buffs. You can still use her right now, but now this is gonna be much more usable. Acquiring the focus is really good, because you can get her S3 up quicker too. So this is very nice to have. So this is really cool. I like this. Attacks all enemies, but then when hit, always results in a critical hit. So I was theory crafting this. I was thinking that you can build her with really high attack, really high crit damage, and just ignore the crit. Because realistically, you're setting up for the S3. The S2, like, the mod isn't good, even though it's a cleaving skill. You ideally want to use it for the CR boost at this point, and then really just like focus, like, I don't know, 300 plus critical hit damage, really high, as high attack as possible. Because if you use this and you have full focus, the damage mod is insane. If I remember correctly, hold on, let me just look this up right now. I have the data mine thing open up. Yeah, so yeah, you wouldn't really care about the crit damage on the S1. It's a 0.6% damage AoE. Very, very low. Soul burn it, you would probably never soul burn it, is 0.85. Very low. But the skill 3 is 1.5 times mod. And 140% damage to 2 targets, 160% damage to 1 target. So as you can see here, yeah, less enemies deals more damage. So very cool. Araminta Catalyst, 14% increased damage compared to before. She's like a mini ML Araminta now, 50% chance to stand for 1 turn. I personally don't think that's enough to make people start using her again. Again, if you have ML Araminta, I think ML Araminta is still far more superior than Fire Araminta. While it's a nice buff, I think she suffers like Lilibet, whereas like you're banking on a 50% chance to stun. You wouldn't really run that on defense. If you run it on offense, a 50% chance to stun, if you're going to rely on the stun, it's not going to really help you. So you would use her regardless of the buff, or don't use her at all. Like, that's my point. So I feel like Araminta kind of got the short end of the stick for this one. Assassin Collies is very good. So before when they announced Assassin Collies buffs, we had that problem where it sounded like a nerf. And because they recalled the original buff, like, you know, they just didn't give it to us. I think they also believed it was a nerf. So it was like, instead of killing, if you land the stun, you'll land the silence on all enemies or something like that on the S3. But they completely removed that now. It's like completely gone. So there's no aspect to that. But rather they did buff the S1, so I really like that. And this is going to be a very, very game-changing part to Assassin Collie. Increase the speed if she is not, if she doesn't have debuffs. So if she's stealth, also increases the speed for 1 turn. So her passive is that if she gets no debuffs on the beginning of the turn, she'll end with stealth at the end of her turn. And sorry, beginning of the turn she gets attack buff. End of the turn she gets stealth if she has no debuffs on her. Now that she gets a speed, Oh wait, it's actually the S1. Sorry, my bad, my bad. Yeah, so the speed for 1 turn, if you use this S1, is gonna be really good because she's gonna be really fast. And if you can, you know, keep her undebuffed, she'll pretty much always do her speed buff, pretty much. Damage dealt increase the proportion of the caster's speed as well. That's always been there. Her speed scaling is not as high as someone like Sid or something like that, but every bit counts. And Assassin Kali arguably should be about 250 speed before imprints. That's ideally the goal. Faster the better, but you might be suffering from some stats in the attacking department. But the damage is increased 12%, and then the damage in the stealth state is increased 9%. So what this looks like is that the base is increased by 12%, and then when you're going to stealth, it's 9%. I was mentioning that some Assassin Callies, even on a defense team, if you're going to use like F Maya to bait them, some can hit really hard already, especially if they have Dust Devil. I think that with this now, Assassin Callie becomes a very, very good defense hero. This S1 buff becomes a very good defense hero because if you're going to go with some kind of like, I don't know, cleave comp, like speedy cleave comp, unless you have like an extremely fast like Oxlots, you're gambling on beating Assassin Callie. And usually on Oxlots like cleave comps, you don't want to risk Assassin Callie to nuke. Now obviously if you do run, I think, Assassin Callie like on a defense team, I think to counter cleave comps you want to build her with some kind of like really tanky team, or like even Kayron would be really helpful. So like people don't just go for, I don't know, like crazy cleave comps like Oxlots into BBK or something, or Arbiter Vildred of course, but Kayron, Arbiter Vildred, Assassin Callie, that'd be really annoying. But then I guess you'll be running into some kind of bruiser comp. Anyways, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Purgus, I know it's gonna sound bad, but I'm gonna skip a couple heroes here. I don't have Purgus built. I think that he can be good. Like he recently got stat buffs, I think, or no, skill buffs. Now he's gonna be a bit better. Decrease damage dealt proportional caster's max health. 15% chance to stun for 1 turn is very nice, and then 50% chance to stun for 1 turn instead of it having under the 30% health. So kind of usable. Now I have made the mistake where Fire Corvus became really good, very meta now, and I kind of like overlooked his buffs when he got his buff. So perhaps Purgus gets the same treatment. From what I read right now though, I don't know like if he's as influential as someone like Fire Corvus at the moment, but still can be decent. Armin, I was looking at her buffs and I was thinking that while I think in the PvP scenarios, unless you're like lower tier PvP and you're very new and you have Armin, I think for PvE should be really good. I think for PvE, 100% chance to decrease hit chance for 2 turns, caster defense increased by for 2 turns, decreases damage suffered by all allies by 10% when this skill is under cooldown. Very nice thing to have. I do believe that this would stack with Aureus, otherwise this should have been mentioned here. So I think for newer players, if you're trying to like tackle Abyss and you need like a very tanky tank, while she was always really good for Abyss, especially for early game players, I think she might be more usable now. Abyss or some kind of like boss fight, much more usable. Crozet, I love this. I think Crozet has a very good buff. His barrier can be granted every turn now instead of every 2 turns. Attack all enemies with sword, 75% chance to provoke for 1 turn, while decreasing the combat range by 50%. That's kind of like a mini Fire Cecilia. Of course, it's not 100%, but Fire Cecilia originally had a 75% chance to provoke all for 1 turn, and then she got a buff to be 100. But she is a 5-star. Across it, being an ice hero is going to be beneficial for this meta, I believe. So I think that could be usable for some PvP comps even. So if you have him built for like, let's say PvE, PvP, he might be usable for some certain scenarios. And a 4-turn cooldown. Very nice thing to have. Kitty, Clarissa, and Achades. I'm going to cover them together because I think this is interesting that they're giving us cleansers with some different type of unique niche to them. So Kitty, Clarissa S3 usually cleanses, technically you call it cleansing, but it decreases the debuff duration for all allies for 2 turns. So if it's somehow, if you get a 3-turn debuff or debuff extension, it would only decrease it for 2 turns. So keep that in mind. But it does grant her an extra turn. So now, even though I have myself retired Kitty Clarissa, I think she might be more usable now in terms of like, you know, if you're going into GVG and like there's a Dizzy comp and then there's someone hard to take out, but maybe they're really slow. So instead of like running Destina, maybe pushing, you know, the entire team CR, maybe you will be able to do like Kitty Clarissa, cleanse the full team, do a dual attack, because once she has the S3 up, if she grants an extra turn, her S1 rather, can do a dual attack with the highest attack attacker. So let's say if you had like Luna on your team, I'm spitballing here. This might not make sense to a lot of team comps. You might think I'm a noob, but it can really work. You can nuke them out really quick, so you might not need a healer in that aspect. Kitty Clarissa suffered from all the cleansers we have now because she doesn't have a heal. So that really makes her like really hard to use in a GVG fight, but now she's much more usable because if you could take out their threats really quick, you don't need a healer really, and she will always have that, you know, that S3 buff. She'll be able to do that dual attack every time she gets a turn. So I think Kitty Clarissa now is going to be very usable. Achades has a similar thing. Her because she's already a cleanser on her S3, but now her S2 able to grant invincibility just like before, but decrease the target skill cooldown by 1 turn. I can't think of like as easy as Kitty Clarissa. Think of like a team or scenario where you could use this, but definitely very good. So now you can bring Fire Achades for the debuff cleanse, but you can also think about like, you know, using her for skilled cooldown decrease as well. So very cool to have. Now, you know, yeah, I think that Achades was always usable, whereas Kitty Clarissa became harder to use, like I said, because she's not a healer. But Achades was always usable, especially if you don't have Destina, especially if you needed that invincibility for some certain scenarios. But now I think she'll be more used because the skill cooldown for 1 turn can really set up some like technical strategies, very technical strategies. Utterly becomes very interesting. I've never built her. I never looked at her until this. 30% less damage from attacks that target all allies. So AoE damage, 30% less damage. How does this? I'm pretty sure this would stack with Aureus because it's not damage sharing. It's pure damage mitigation. But I don't think this would stack with something like Proof of Valor. I think that's very nice. Depending on her base stats, you might be able to build her for anti-cleave comp, but I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, I never really looked into her until the buffs here. 40% combat readiness boost, and then make them make them unable to be buffed, so unbuffable and silenced for 2 turns. That's kind of cool. Do you think it will stack with Adamant Shield? It should stack with Adamant Shield, yes. Because Adamant Shield is critical hit damage specifically. I think it would stack with Adamant Shield. Yeah, we'll have to find out. And I'm pretty sure some smarter people will figure this out and give us like a full list of what's stackable or not. That would be a nice thing to have. Now, Gunther. This is an insane change. So we were talking on stream that Gunther is now an ML Ken, pure ML Ken like killer. 29% increased damage compared to before, whereas before the damage dealt is increased according to the data mine, 30% more damage if the enemy's bleeding. That required some setup, but now you don't need the setup. You would just build him extremely high attack, like full attack everything, attack sets. You don't need crit, like, you know, crit set. So most likely maybe you want to build him with like a health set or something to make him a bit more beefy. So like full attack set, full crit, so he can't deal a critical hit. And his passive now gives him an increased critical hit resistance by 70%. Someone was saying that, you know, you put that up with an anti-crit buff like someone like DN, and then he'd be at 100% critical hit resistance. I don't know if it adds, you know, the 50% onto the 70%. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, even with DN's buff, even if it was multiplicative, you wouldn't really get a critical hit. But now the thing is though, how beefy is he? Apparently he is a warrior. So I asked the stream and people are saying that he is a warrior, but he is a 3-star, so his stats are lower, like base innately. So can you get him really beefy with really high attack? I'm not quite sure, but I might actually build him as a nuker. He seems very cheap to build because you don't need to hunt for the crit. You don't need to hunt for crit damage. Just attack and HP. There's no effectiveness, right? So you don't need to, yeah, no effectiveness. So he seems to like be a really easy to build hero. Oh, effectiveness. No, you do need it. You do need it if you want the defense break decreased. Yeah, so maybe health set, maybe hit set. So effectiveness set, that'd be really cool. Okay, and then very quick buffs for artifacts. So this is going to be a possibility now. So we were always saying that, okay, we should keep one in case they ever do artifact buffs. First time ever we've seen artifact buffs. And this is a little hint of it. That's funny though. That's funny that they are buffing the exact 4 like worst artifacts in the game. So I find that they know about it. It's really funny for me. Justice for all, 100% chance to grant the caster random buff for 2 turns at the end of the turn. While this was released with Charles's banner, I still don't think this is usable for Charles. I was saying that yes, it would be nice to have. Originally when this was released, it would not be usable because you would never be able to have 2 or more buffs, and Charles' S2 scales from the second buff beyond to scale his S2 damage. But now if you get 2 turns for 2 turns, you'll be able to stack at least 1 after the second turn. So you'll always be able to have 2 buffs up at the same time, right? I think that's the case because it's 2 turns. Yeah, you'll always be able to do it. But this is talking about a max limit broken. So keep that in mind. The 100% chance to proc is talking about a max limit broken. Okay, so this is assuming everybody has a plus 30 justice for all, which at this point I still don't know if this is usable. In my opinion, 2 random buffs for 2 turns would make this a decently usable one. And you got RNG to roll, so it's not like it's super broken, and it's at the end of the turn. So in my opinion, Smilegate, if you're ever, you know, possibly even watching this video, I really don't think that it's broken to have 2 buffs, 2 random buffs, 2 turns at the end of the turn. It's not that bad because you can dispel it. It's not bad, but because it's only a 1 buff thing, I don't think this is still usable at this point. And I can't think of 2 buffs for 2 turns. I can't think of anyone that can really use it at the moment. So it's not really a buff. While you attempted it, which is good, it's not a buff yet. Violet Talisman, attack 10% at the beginning of each turn, stack up to 3 times. So realistically, it's the same thing. You get a 30% attack, but instead of, you know, waiting for, you know, 10 turns, now it's more usable for 3 turns. Now 30% attack, is that going to be good? Again, this was released with Violet. I don't think this is going to be a Violet artifact. I was about to say this isn't going to be a Violet Talisman. This is not going to be a Violet artifact still. Again, the question remains, who is it going to be used for? It's a Thief exclusive. I'm not quite sure. Noble Oath becomes sort of interesting though. Max limit broken, effect resistance increased by 100%. There are thresholds though. When it says the up to this language, there are thresholds you have to meet in terms of health. So it's kind of like El's Fist. It's kind of like the Shepherds of Chaos, that free event artifact, where you have to hit certain HP thresholds before you get the max proc. So I think you have to be like under 30% to get 100% defense or 100% effect resistance. Depending on the hero you're using, unless you got like SS Acades or someone that can extend immortality and keep their HP low, this isn't going to be that useful. And again, if you have the immortality, you know, is the effect resistance going to be useful? Is the defense going to be useful? I don't know, but might be more usable now. But again, it requires a 30 plus 30. Is anybody gonna plus 30 this? I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure Wales will do it, because for the sake of having it in their arsenal, I think it's very, very good. And then Alexa's Basket. Now this is a buff. This is what I'm talking about. Alexa's Basket is going to be very usable. When I read this, I read away, I'm like, oh, okay, Arbiter Villager is getting a nerf, but Arbiter Villager is getting a buff with this. Now, Alexa's Basket, though it's read as and critical hit chance, so grant attack greater attack buff. Keep that in mind, greater attack buff, and critical hit chance for cast for 1 turn at the start of the turn. This is gonna be insanely good for Arbiter Vildred. So Arbiter Vildred generally running Moonblade right now. If you build a really fast Arbiter Vildred, it's gonna be so annoying to deal with, because now there's a 40% chance to get a greater attack buff, and there's separate rolls. So it's 40% to get the greater attack, and or 40% to get critical hit chance. So you might not roll anything. You might roll one or the other, or you might roll both. Okay, so that's what it means. So when you see and, it doesn't mean like you will get them once you proc to 40%. They're separate rolls at the start of the turn. So this is going to be so amazing. So Arbiter Vildred, if you kill him off and you have Alexa's Basket and you can proc like at least this, oh man, see ya later. But Moonblade is still really good if your Arbiter Vildred is slow. So it's kind of interesting. I would definitely say Alexa's Basket is going to be one of those really good RNG artifacts you want to put on a defense thief. So even, in my opinion, even Baiken can benefit from this. Although Baiken I still think would be RNL specific. But if you have like a decently slow Baiken, like 180 on a defense team, and you're kind of like setting up a team comp where, you know, they can't really cleave you. Let's say you have like a Kayron or whatever. Actually, you know, I'm getting ideas now. I don't know. Kayron might even himself, if he has immunity on with this buff, with this artifact buff, I think this could work on him too. Anyways, with the critical hit chance buff, ideally you don't want to risk this, so maybe on your thieves you still want to build them like 80% crit rate or something. You don't want to build them like at 50%. You don't want to really roll that. That's just way too hard. Or you go the opposite route. Go really high crit, really high attack, lower crit chance, but lower crit damage. So the increased attack gets scaled up higher. So you also eat through C Armin. That'd be interesting too. And then if you do roll the crit chance, you still might get some crit damage. So like maybe 220% crit damage, like 5k attack, Arbiter Vildred or something like that. That'd be interesting. I don't know. I'm just like thinking random stuff. But so Arbiter Vildred is sort of fixed with this artifact buff. Now time to get a plus 30. So no longer can we say, oh man, this is a troll artifact, because now it's a possibility that all artifacts can be buffed going forward. So something to keep in mind. So all the artifacts I say that, oh, it's pretty bad, don't pull it or don't go for it, can also get a buff. So keep that in mind. Very scary now. You want to get all artifacts. So speed increase, this is what I was talking about in part 1 there. Basar, speed increased by 5. That's insanely good. If I remember correctly, Harado's 111 speed. ML Baal just beats him by like 3, I believe. So like 114. So I think it's 111. So very usable Basar now. Like I was saying that except the elemental disadvantage that Basar has, because he's being an earth and Harado is a dark element. Except elemental disadvantage, Basar will be very usable now, as good or even better, so to speak, than Harado in a lot of senses. But they're not a direct replacement, because Harado has his own thing going on with his heal reduction passive and his silence and stuff like that. So I mean, they're different, but Basar is much more usable now. Tenebria, yeah, everyone on the list here. Champion Zerato gets a speed increase. if you guys recently watched my Champion Zerato feature videos, you would know why I'm not super excited about it. You want him to be as slow as possible, especially if you're countering like someone that does like damage over time, debuffs. So like I guess poison doesn't really matter. Oh no, poison matters. Poison, burns and bleeds. Those are big. So having faster speed means that he'll grant his turn, so he'll actually be inflicted by that debuff if it's still on him by the time he gets a turn, that kind of stuff. But everyone else would benefit from a speed buff, so this is very cool. So Aries, Cancer, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, those are the ones that get the buff. I mean, Gloomy Rain will get a really good benefit from this with the high speed there. Very good. Jenna, I was like, what? Jenna's a mage? I didn't even know. That's how bad she is in my opinion. No, I'm just kidding. Challenger Dominion getting the speed buff is very nice to have as well. Very beneficial. Celestial Mercedes, I'm just seeing like a couple of them. So this is a good buff all around, man. This is awesome. So that's cool to note though too, because they can change constellation like specific buffs. So that's something. This is a new, man. This is a totally new thing they're doing. So we can hope for, like, let's say if like a certain hero in the future that's meta, it's like, oh man, they're lacking so much HP or whatever. All of a sudden, at the snap of a finger, they can be like, hey, let's change the constellation HP on like these, and then all these heroes gets like more HP. So very cool. Very cool. And then the rest, we talked about this hero ML hero balance adjustment. They're the same, so I'm not gonna talk about them here on this video because this has been a really long one already. I wanted to make this short too, so I'm gonna end this. Let me know what you guys think of the buffs below, artifacts, the speed buffs on the mages, and then of course the heroes. Let me know your thoughts for the YouTube sake, so leave it in the comments below. Glad to read them. If I came up with some like weird theory crafts and you guys have some better ideas, please let me know, because I think this is, you know, this is where we're playing around and being all nerdy. It's very cool. So I'm gonna end this here. So if you guys have Discord, check out the Discord server, follow me on Twitter, and subscribe to YouTube if you haven't. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.